Even though the 73 to 87 Chevy trucks have commonly become known as the Squarebody Chevy, GM actually called these their rounded series. And these trucks had several firsts, from standard disc brakes, power windows, and eventually fuel injection. They would maintain the longest production run of Chevy trucks in history, even bleeding over into the early 1990s. And from the very beginning, these trucks saw customizers taking note, but in recent years, a more factory-style square body has become the norm. So for this episode of Influence and Impact, we're going to the end of the C-10 designation, but we're also going to the longest kind of year span, basically the same model of truck, and I think probably in the entire history of Chevy trucks. I think this is kind of the longest span because we're talking at least 15 plus years.
Well, actually, it's 18 years. We're talking about what we refer to as a square body truck, but what GM referred to as the rounded line.
And that's kind of weird because to me, the 67 to 72 is a lot more round than the square body truck.
That obviously being the action line, but for this generation of truck, they decided to call it the rounded line, which I think is kind of funny because we've always called them square bodies.
Yeah. And you were telling me something a while ago about where that square body term came from. Or where at least we think it might have kind of started.
The funny thing about it was, for so many years while I was growing up, they were just referred to as the Chevy trucks. I mean, you just had a 73 to 87. And we all know that, yes, there was the time that the GMT 400s came out, the 88 to 98 trucks came out, and they were still the heavier lines, your Duallys or your Suburbans.
Yeah, those still kind of carried over to like 91, 92.
Yeah, 91. And they did call those RVs at the time. The dealership designation from 88 to 91 for the square body trucks, they were called RVs.
Because CK kind of meant the newer truck.
Right. But CK still meant, C being two-wheel drive, K being four-wheel drive. So you still had your K10s, your C10s, that kind of stuff. But just to eliminate confusion at the car dealerships, from 1988 to 91, a square body truck was still an RV, which kind of makes no sense, right?
Who knows?
I know, right?
That's what we found out a lot on these is some of the weird kind of namings. But I think our friend Travis might have had something to do with the whole term square body because he is a huge square body fan. Yes. He had one in high school.
Well, that was his first car. Yeah,
that was his first car. Was a square body, and then obviously we'll talk later on. Red Rocker. That was a very influential truck. But
but Travis, he was kind of the first guy that I heard use the term square body. Because I remember even saying, like, what are you talking about? Because, again, too, it was just a Chevy truck, right? And even, too, square body didn't make a lot of sense because, it was like, well, where do you see it square? Well, you only see it square. It's the shape of a brick, but it is kind of rounded if you look at it straight on.
Yeah, I mean, it had a curve coming down from the body line, had an indented curve, going up. But, yeah, I think it's just because I think the front end. The front end is very flat on these trucks, whereas, some of the earlier ones, there was a little more of the slope or maybe some curve around the edges. This was a little bit more flat. Right.
Well, the good thing about this truck is that this was also a complete redesign compared to the action line.
Yeah. It was actually designed by Bill Mitchell.
That's right. And Bill Mitchell is Corvette famous. He was a big part of Corvette. Yes.
Also Cadillac from like pretty much the cool Cadillac.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, Harley Earl, all that, but he carried on that legacy pretty well. So 59 to 84, Bill Mitchell was in charge of designing Cadillac.
Right.
He's also very involved with the Bel Air. So, I mean, once again, you have a very iconic designer putting their touch on a truck.
Yeah. And with this truck, they kind of scrapped the whole idea of the action line and also the CK, the 60 to 66s, where they started from the ground up, different suspension, different powertrains, multiple powertrains. Yeah. There was one of the big standouts is the rear suspension, where they went back to a leaf spring suspension.
Yeah, instead of the trailing arm and coil springs.
Right. And that was because at the time Ford and Chevy were in this huge capacity war, where they were trying to outdo each other on how much their truck could haul or how much their car could tow. So, you look at like some of the old commercials where they're like, there's a Ford truck in the back of a Chevy truck that's crawling up a hill that's full of cinder blocks, just these impossible, like I think there's one where it's like a Squarebody's towing a 747, airplane or something like that. A lot of lumbers, like giant trees. So that was kind of like them flexing,
Well, it was still kind of in the vein of the work truck mentality, construction,
right?
Kind of guy, and they were marketing towards that, and and obviously, have to go biggest, baddest, best, heavy duty, with that, and there's also, that kind of reflected in the powertrains because.
Well, you could pick for so many. I mean, no, honestly, they allowed you to run the gamut. I mean, you could still get an inline 6 in a 73, but you could also get a 454. And
no one's really going for the inline.
No one's doing the inline. Yeah. That was kind of the gimmies. But this was also the time when, prior to that, you could order packages, but mostly they were trim. Like you could get an extra.
Yeah, it had some chrome trim around it. It had
But this was like if you wanted a half-ton heavy half with a big block, and you wanted a short bed, and you wanted it to have a deluxe interior, you could do that then. Whereas before, that was kind of a dealer-only option, and you didn't have many things because, again, trucks were still a work vehicle. They weren't considered your man cave type of possession, right? These trucks were finally like, I want to have a plaid interior, I want a 454, I want a 12-bolt rear end because I'm going to take my family camping. And again, camping goes back to this. I know I keep bringing that up, but the 70s were about getting outdoors.
Yeah. Well, and I think some of the naming kind of reflected that because, we now kind of, the Chevy Silverado is the Chevy truck.
Right.
But that was a trim package.
Right.
On these.
Yeah, and rare.
And that was kind of rare, but I mean, just listing off some of these, obviously the Custom Deluxe, that was a kind of a carryover. The Silverado we just mentioned, but the Scottsdale.
Right.
The Bonanza. You had obviously the Camper Special, like you mentioned, and then, the GMCs and stuff. You had the Bo James, the Gentleman's, Jim, the Desert Fox, the Amarillo. You had these kind of names that were like your Chevy tough, outdoorsy kind of thing. And a lot of the kind of styling in the 70s, the square bodies kind of reflected that of your more desert colors, your ochres, your, browns, your, kind of different stuff that was a little bit more of the outdoor kind of rugged kind of style.
Oh, the one of my favorite truck colors is the 73, 74 teal. It's a beautiful color and extremely rare. And when you see it now, it's kind of worn out because usually you don't see it in its.
It's
true,
not going to be. Yeah, it's not your new.
It's not your new version.
It's been faded.
But even when it's faded, it's still just a great looking color. And it kind of has this weird kind of greenish, turquoise-ish kind of hue to it, but doesn't look super flashy.
Yeah.
And that, again, that's the 70s. The 70s, we had avocado green refrigerators. So, you got to have
and that's
something that matches.
It all reflects, the design, the fashion, the look, of all of it. And I think, too, this was also the era that trucks really started to get popular on TV.
That's true.
I think in the 60s it was, you had Bullitt, with your Mustangs or your sports cars, your James Bond stuff. Well, now you had all the tough guy action, shows and movies in the 70s and early 80s. And they were driving trucks.
I mean, I'm a product of that time, childhood, and guilty as charged. The Fall Guy was on Friday nights. It was on at 10 o'clock at night. Actually, no, sorry, I got to back that up. Fall Guy was
were
on.
Were you allowed to stay up?
No, I remember.
No,
because this is why I know it was on a Thursday, because I was not allowed to stay up and watch it.
Because you had
because I had to go to school.
Yeah.
And I would beg my mom, I got to watch this. I got to see what Colt Seavers is going to do, right? And of course, every episode they would jump that thing.
Yeah. Well,
every episode, right?
Look at the Dukes of Hazzard. Yeah, you had to jump it.
Right.
Yeah. You had to jump something, whatever you drive.
And then John Baker, which again too, I'm stating my age, but if you watched Chips back in the day, John Baker had a beautiful blue GMC step side that was slightly lifted.
Yeah, it was lifted a little bit. You had, full KC, lights, the light
Yeah.
bar on the, the back, front push bumper.
Yeah.
But it had some graphics on it too. I mean, it was kind of a little bit of the van style graphics a little bit.
And what the funny thing about that is, a friend of mine actually, his uncle worked on chips, and what I remember from that is that GMC lent, so they didn't give it to him.
Yeah,
and they only gave him 2. And
so that's why they never jumped them.
And that's why that truck was always like kind of left alone. Now, Colt Sievers and the Fall Guy, Lee Majors, that was a different story. I mean, they knew they were all in. But chips came first, and I think that was GM's kind of like dip my toe in the water. Let's see if we can sell some cars out of this deal.
Yeah,
and they did. I mean, they the trucks, of course, were super popular, and the TV show kind of drove that to to that kind of lifestyle. Is like, look at the guy on TV. He's putting dirt bikes in the back of their thing and going on. I can do that too, right?
No, and that's a lot of the kind of 70s style did really blend into that with some of the paint schemes, obviously, that people were doing, but what was coming from the factory, coming from GM, you had some fade line, kind of stuff. You had, like, obviously you had a full, pace truck as well. That was an Indy pace truck that was all, kind of lined out and stuff like that. And, even some scallops with the sport, edition. So,
well, they also, GM had an idea to come up with these different packages that would appeal to different people, because the idea too is that they wanted the truck to become the gentleman's truck. So again, Chevrolet had a version called a Gentleman Jim. It was a half-ton truck that didn't have a lot of weight capacity, so it wasn't like it was a work truck per se. It was more or less like the guy that might be an executive that might need a truck, to take to his business meeting, but also to stop by the hardware store and get, some supplies. GMC, obviously they had their Bo James, again, is another package kind of relating to that general buyer instead of the contractor. But then GM kind of went crazy. I mean, GMC for many years had either a pace truck or some type of official race vehicle. Whether that would have been NASCAR or Indy. I mean, obviously Indy's kind of the more famous one with them. But then there was also other versions. You brought up the Sport. The Sport was introduced back then, and it was, again, a way of just kind of styling what was popular at the time. Because at the time, you brought up vans. Vans were a huge deal in the 70s.
Well, Truckin' Magazine, which was the first, truck-related custom magazine. It was called Truckin', but it was all vans. The first few issues, when Steve Stillwell and those guys went out to a van run.
That's right.
And got the idea to start that magazine.
That's right.
So if people were doing custom vans, and you started to see that on the truck side, especially with like the campers and stuff, where, okay, it's going to look like the inside of a van with shag carpet, oak wood grain and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So,
I mean, I will say that these trucks are kind of close to my heart. I had a very nice one. I had a 75 Silverado, big block, 12 bolt turbo 400, all equipped from the factory. And it was a very complete truck. What was really nice about that package is that it had engraved aluminum strips that went around the door panels. It had simulated wood grain in there. It looked more or less like I was sitting in my grandmother's living room.
Yeah.
Which reflected the time.
It reflected the 70s, that kind of style in that time versus, earlier ones you had a metal door panel or metal door with basically just a little plastic or rubber, kind of panel that basically was just to surround all the internal workings for the, window cranks and door handles.
It kept your sleeves out of the window crank.
Yeah.
Is basically what it did.
Yeah. It wasn't anything, fancy or stylized. It just kind of had a little more style to them.
Yeah.
Let's talk about a little bit about kind of the year breakdown, because we mentioned these go from 73 to 87.
Right.
And then a little bit into 91.
Yeah.
So to me, like the 73, to 78 or even 75, like those still had like kind of a little bit of a classic look, because they had the single round headlight. You didn't get into like the 80s look,
and that's funny too, because obviously there's the 73, 74s that currently everybody's very sought after. And I think the reason why there are is because those were the first 2 years. But also is because there are so few of those trucks. And it's not the fault of General Motors. General Motors built a ton of trucks those years. The problem is there was a design flaw in the rust prevention and the way that the rust or the way that the water drained out of those vehicles, that actually most of those vehicles rotted out in the first 5 years that they owned them.
So not even, we're not talking even out of warranty kind of a thing. I mean, I don't know what warranty they had back then, but probably not the whole 5 year, 10-year deal. But yeah, usually we think of, okay, 20-year-old truck in the Midwest, it's going to have some rust. But if you're talking 5 years, then
they were
that's
done.
a bad deal.
So by like 75, 76, they had kind of known that, and they started designing it. And it was even part of General Motors' campaign in the later 70s to show that they had upgraded to more rust prevented.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like the double wall
construction. You know, obviously that was for dents too, but it made a lot of sense because they just didn't figure out how the water was being trapped inside of those trucks. So you had the rot problems. Mm-hmm. You know, and they fixed it for the most part, but those were kind of the first 2 years. So again, too, that's the reason why those years are very sparse and very hard to find, because they're gone. By like 77, 78 is really when they got into their stride. And that's when you have like the multiple trim years. You know, we mentioned the Scottsdales, the Custom Deluxes, the Bonanzas, the Silverados. All of those were different levels of trim. And depending on where you wanted to, you know, make your purchase at, you had many options. Whereas before you had 3 options. You basically had a Custom Deluxe, and a CST, right? So now you're able to say, I want the
X, Y,
vehicle
and Z,
my way, right? One thing that I think to me that stands out is throughout this year span is there was a remodel or a redesign in 1981, actually late 81.
I was going to say, we also got to talk about the stepchild year of 1980.
And that's what I was going to bring up,
Yeah.
right, is that there's a 1 year only truck that is a 1980. And what's strange about it is it still has all the body styling of the 78, but has a square headlight.
Yeah.
Right?
So it's kind of looks a little weird.
Looks a little weird.
Yeah.
And then the tailgate, which is the cleanest tailgate they ever made, because it just says the Chevrolet stamped in the middle. Right? It doesn't have the trim piece that goes over it. It's just literally just right in the center, Chevrolet. All the rest of the years, they offset that to the passenger side.
Yeah.
So it looked kind of weird. During the 80s, it looked modern because that was something that, oh, wow, look, it's offset. You know, and that was kind of an 80s design. But for 1 year only, in the center tailgate, if you ever run by a wrecking yard and you see that, that's a 1980s tailgate. 81, though, they reconfigured a lot of things. Obviously, the front end.
And that's the biggest kind of difference. But overall, like, the truck design was the same
Pretty
kind of
much.
shape. It was
Yeah.
same kind of design, but they definitely, the front end changed dramatically.
Well, and the reason for it was, again, there were some rust problems. And also there was the famous hood failure, where the 80 and earlier vehicles, the 80 to your 73s, had they actually covered up the windshield wipers. So the windshield wipers were actually tucked underneath the hood. So it had this long hood that had vents in it for a cowl, but it literally went from the windshield to the tip of the hood, or the front end. Those, if any of you have ever seen those before, usually you'll see that someone's either tried to patch this by putting a piece of angle sheet metal to help support the hood, but most of the time the hoods would just fold in half.
Yeah, just too long, too much, weight for it to.
The fulcrum point
up.
was wrong,
Yeah.
and the springs on the hood would just end up folding the hood. So everybody complained about that.
No, I've seen several, of them that over the years, like there's a dent in the hood at the point of the, hinges is mounted because someone, basically, your support is here and you're bending it here. It's just going to peak in the middle. So,
Right.
Yeah.
So they fixed that by actually extending. Well,
They made a wiper cowl.
They
put the wiper cowl back in because they had those on the earlier trucks.
Yes, exactly. So they went ahead and they put the wiper cowl on that deal. They shortened the hood up. They changed the hood hinges, and they needed a grill. They needed to change the grill. You know,
it looks more like a modern or modern for the time. Kind of 80s, more plastic look. If
There's
you will.
that too as well.
Obviously, talk about the square headlights. But they also ditched the drip rails.
That's right.
On those years, and I think a lot of that, we're talking about some of the design for the front. Has the straight lines going back versus the kind of curved front.
Right.
Seemed like they're looking at aerodynamics a little bit.
That truck actually was the first truck that spent the most time on any vehicle when it was designed in the wind tunnel, more than a car.
Oh, wow.
So Bill Mitchell flexed his muscles over at GM and said, if I'm going to do this, I want to make sure this is the most aerodynamic vehicle that I can possibly make, which is hilarious because look at...
We call it the flying brick, and we call it a square body. Yeah.
Yeah. You know,
but for a truck, all right, cool.
Yeah. So they spent a ton of time. And like you mentioned, the first year, 73s, 74s do not have a drip rail, period. They were not installed at all. It wasn't until people complained, and most of them complained about they could not smoke in the rain.
You got to remember the 80s and stuff, too. That was still when it was smoking section or non-smoking section in a restaurant.
Yes.
So, yeah.
You know, I mean, they had vent windows.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. But most people, they would want to crack their window while they were driving in the rain and be able to ash the cigarette out the window. And of course, without having drip rails, you would just get plummeted by the rain.
Yeah, the rain's coming in.
Yeah. So that's why if you look at them, they're screwed on. They're sheet metal screwed on, which... Again, I always thought the funny thing, you know, growing up and working on those trucks, the first thing we would do is unscrew those and weld up the holes.
Yeah.
However, the drip rail also hid a lot of the shortcomings of the fit and finish.
Yeah.
You know, because the drip rail above the door kind of gave you that like illusion that it was straight.
Yeah, you take that off and you can see the huge gap.
Inconsistencies too.
And not even
consistent.
You know,
I mean, it was just the way it was kind of put on, it was like, hey, this fits, weld it. It wasn't like, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to refine this. It was just, oh, it fits, put it on.
Yeah.
So yeah, if anybody that's ever shaved those and tried to, you know, build a custom truck, you usually ended up reworking that area of the door or the roof. So, but you know, little things like that were kind of afterthoughts on this truck. But this truck, again, like I mentioned, it was in production from basically... The official production is 1973 to 87.
Yeah.
Okay. There's your 18 years. But then also, obviously, afterwards, you've got your heavy duty lines. Yeah. But to this day, that's still the longest production that GM's ever had on any vehicle.
Car, truck,
you know, car and truck. I don't want to say anything because some of the heavier vehicles, you know, that kind of thing. But, you know, again, too, just regular passenger car or your regular half-ton truck. This is the longest version. So that means that there's the most of them. Mm-hmm. And that's the reason why I think that we still see a square body as even a commuter vehicle.
Yeah, just a daily driver, you know, nothing crazy. Because they had more, this is the progression of more comfortable, more drivable, you know, more performance-oriented trucks. And, you know, going back to kind of what you're saying with the dualies and, you know, the Suburbans being, you know, made later on, you started to see more technology coming into those because they were pushed a little bit more. So I remember seeing I know it was very common, you know, to be done of taking your old square body and putting Suburban power door, you know, panels on it, power seats from a Suburban, the front end, you know, off of a, you know, later, you know, early 90s Suburban or something on there to basically kind of modernize it a little bit.
Yeah. And that's what's fun about square bodies. Similar to the Action Line 67 and 72s, they kind of saw two different lifespans. Mm-hmm. You know, you had your first guy that owned the truck and maybe didn't do much to it. Then in the late 80s, early 90s, because the brand new trucks, you know, you could buy a brand new Suburban and take all the parts off and put it on a 73 truck. So, of course, your accidents or your, you know, wrecking yards, you're able to buy, let's say, the front end off of it. I know a very popular swap back in my day was to put the 88 to 91 front end on a earlier truck, whether it be a standard cab or a Suburban or a dually. I mean, I had an 86 dually that had a 91 front end on it. And I pretty much
it's going to look like a 91.
It's going to look like a brand new truck, right? You know, and when it's 1992, you know, you look better than driving an 86, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, that was basically a core support and a grill change. And you went to those little small, what we used to call ice cube headlights.
Yeah.
Right. But then now you look at the last, let's say 10, 15 years, and that's not as popular anymore.
No, we've been seeing it a little bit recently though.
Right.
But yeah, for when we're talking square body, you're talking that early 73, 75, even a little bit later, but it's because people are wanting to go for that classic look where kind of the 80s square body kind of still looks like an 80s square body. Yeah. I mean, the front grille on that is very 80s heavy, you know, as far as the style goes, which, like I said, it's getting a little more popular now, but yeah, if we're talking about kind of the huge popularity of the square bodies, it's It's the early 70s ones.
Right.
Started to see a lot of square body stuff kind of pop up alongside the C-10s in the early 2000s. But a lot of it was coming out of Texas.
Oh, for
and a
sure.
guy named Jason Hill.
I don't think you can say a sentence square body without saying Jason Hill.
No, and I think, I think it'd be hard pressed. I could probably name on, 5 fingers of non-square body trucks that he's done. So I think they're all square bodies or square body blazers.
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff. And he's a painter, by trade. Mm-hmm. So usually I'll always have really nice, two-tone graphics, but he'd always put some airbrushing in there.
Yeah.
And then, his guy Jimmy, right? The interior audio guy.
Oh, Jimmy's awesome.
You're talking street rod stuff. So, you look at what was being done kind of, let's say 15 years ago with a square body. You get into the custom side of it, chances are it was something coming out of Jason Hill's shop.
Well, and I think Jason's out of Lubbock, Texas. Yeah. So, that's
truck country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think more pickups there than cars. Probably, right? So I think that goes back to that's what he had. That's what he knew. Mm-hmm. If that's what you have, that's what you know, you usually become pretty good at it.
Yeah.
And Jason has accomplished that. He really has put together some nice trucks. And, it kind of seems like he was almost like pressing them out like one a year for a while. Because he really was kind of, doing that. And even today, his builds still look current.
Yeah, and you can definitely tell that they're kind of a Jason Hill, like a Hill's Hot Rod creation. Like it has the certain elements, like we've talked about, Dell having the certain Delmo combination or the Dell wheels. Like, okay, if it was maybe it was bagged, but it wasn't fully laid out. Right. Or it was probably lowered, super slammed. Right. Billet wheels, a lot of it was billet specialties, that he was using. I remember that. And then it always had a brightly colored paint job mixed with maybe earth tones. Yeah. But then, the interior was always super high quality, kind of street rod kind of level. Right.
Well, let's look at Red Rocker.
I was just going to bring that up. Yeah. We're talking about square bodies, talking about that. Like, that was 2004, 2005?
Yes.
So we're talking almost 20 years ago. Yeah. And that, in my mind, because I was especially too around the time that I was kind of starting to go to more shows and seeing what was out there and being built, that was the high quality truck at that time. Because you had, like I said, full street rod interior, custom dash, start to finish, and then, obviously, you had a full, flame job and stuff on it. So it was kind of like that hot rod kind of era, but this was just all brand new for that time.
Well, what I liked is that Jason kind of made a package, trucks back then, you'd have one very strong suit. If it was, you were a painter, you had a really nice paint job, but the interior wasn't that nice. Or, if you're an engine guy, you really took, pride in your engine. That was kind of your pride engine.
Performance.
Where Jason was trying to create the whole thing. He was trying to create the whole package. With having Jimmy there, next door, it was real easy for him to say, okay, I just painted this thing, hey, can you upholster it? And what Red Rocker was a game changer is that it was really the interior. Not to give away, anything to Jason Hill, because the paint job was beautiful. But
we were seeing paint jobs and shaved door handles and stuff like that. That was fairly common on newer trucks or whatever. But
it was that interior and the way that they reconfigured the dash, and that at the time, the truck guys, reconfiguring the dash was something that lowriders or van guys did. Yeah. You didn't really
You'd see some mini truck guys doing it, but that was just because, they're doing kind of full custom everything.
Right.
Yeah.
But this was Jason was saying, no, I want, like you mentioned, I want to build a street rod looking and performing vehicle that you're going to look at the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And the interior was just the next level. Just the way that they shaped everything, the way that it just made sense in a square body. And it was funny. The stereo was staring right at you. There was literally 5-inch speakers throughout the dashboard that if you're driving down the road, you were looking at a speaker, so that was also kind of a very unique feature that makes a lot of sense, because square bodies just have this wide dash that doesn't really do much.
It's kind of flat. Doesn't really.
And the only, I will mention this though, because this is kind of a fun fact about that truck. The only downfall of that truck, and it was a great design, but just the execution was a little weird. And that was the inside door handles.
Or lack of.
Lack of, because they thought it'd be really cool. And I always refer to it as the video game button, because it literally was like the button that you would see on like a Galaga game or Space
like
Invaders.
The big old round.
The big round like panic button.
Yeah, this is kind of before like people were making and machining buttons. This was, okay, like what can we use from something else?
What's available
here? Yeah.
Right. And the funny thing was, so they put a solenoid, because obviously the door handles were shaved on the outside, but they put a solenoid on there. So they figured, well, let's shave the manual linkage for the inside handle and go to an electric button. Well, the electric button was basically placed on the door panel right around your knee. So if you were driving in the car, and let's say if you kind of relaxed your knee a little bit and like let the
kind of lean it over,
on there, you'd hit the button, the door would open.
And then also the flip of that is, let's say your battery, or you have an issue with electrics, you might be stuck in.
Well, funny that happened, because Travis and I were supposed to go to a car show one morning, and Travis lived across town, and I was
across the street. He didn't live across town.
Well, no, this is when he still lived across town.
Okay.
And so I'm waiting for him, and where is this guy? Because he was just going to pick me up. We were just going to jump in Red Rocker and go to the show. And so I'm waiting for him, and I'm calling him. He's not answering his phone. So finally, I was getting kind of worried about him. I took a drive over to his house to, find out maybe battery's dead or something like that. And there was a police officer there, and Travis is there with his truck. And as I pull up, and I'm kind of like, oh, what's happening here? Like, is he getting a ticket or,
probably got pulled over or something?
Yeah, something like that. Come to find out that he got in the car and the battery was dead, and he shut the door, and that killed all of the system. So the button wouldn't work. Power windows wouldn't work. He's stuck in the car.
Yeah.
Now, the best thing is that he's stuck in the car with his cell phone still in his, because he was warming the car up and turned it off, left the door open. I don't know why the battery went dead, but anyways, he's stuck in this car. Well, he was stuck in the car for over 30 minutes waiting for someone to drive down the street, because it's early in the morning on a Sunday. No one's driving around.
Yeah, like you said, he doesn't have his phone with him.
Doesn't have a phone with him.
Yeah.
So the cop was the guy that pulled up and was like, "Are you okay?" And he's like, knocking on the window like
he's been kidnapped.
He's
or
been
something.
kidnapped, and of course, there's no door handle. So that was a pretty funny thing, and we got it worked out. But it was kind of like,
get him.
I went back to my house.
I
went back to my house, got a battery, and I actually a tool battery, and I jumped the door with a tool battery and opened the door. So yeah, but whatever. I mean, it's you live and learn, and for those of you that don't want to shave door handles, make sure you have a fail-safe.
Yeah.
Right.
Make sure there's always a way to get back in there.
That's
in
right.
Case something happens.
That's right.
So.
But the Squarebody though was, I think from the get-go, it was the customized truck, because even GM was doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. All the special editions that we talked about.
Yeah. And that also led into the guys that they now felt, this is my truck. This is my personal truck. I'm going to do it my way. Mm-hmm. And also they kept these trucks. These trucks, guys held on to these things longer than your previous trucks. I think that had a lot to do with the fact that they got to design their own way. So why would you want to change anything different? You got everything you want, Also remember, this was the time of cheap gasoline. So a 12-gallon saddle tank with a 454 that got you about 120 miles.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
But gasoline was under $1 for most of the time that truck was available. Mm-hmm. Right. So having my 75 with my 454 in it, I'd have to get gas every single day.
Yeah.
Every day.
But you're good. Yeah. You're like, whatever.
That's fine.
Just normal.
Yeah.
Part of the routine.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that was Red Rocker was 2005.
Yeah.
Ish. I mean, didn't see too many of the square bodies kind of.
I don't think until maybe
popped up around there. One that does stick out in mind, that was Joe Molina's from C-10 Vatos.
Oh, yeah.
He had a square body that he was building for years.
Yes.
And that was the thing is he, severed ties, longtime member.
Right.
Mini truck guy. So, Kurt over at AutoCore was doing what a mini truck guy would do on the, on chain reaction. So, yeah, it was the 70s one, but it had 24-inch wheels.
Yeah.
Body drop, shaved. Full fiberglass,
right.
stereo on it, custom paint job and stuff like that. So it wasn't, I think, until, a few years later that the trim started to kind of be okay and be cool again to leave on these.
Well,
trucks.
that obviously we're gonna have to give Joe Yezzi some credit, because him coming out with his and his story, story of, he wasn't trying to create a trend. He was trying to relive his childhood, and I think that he did it in a classic way.
Well, and that's the thing too. We talk about the SS1. That truck started out as just a lowered square body. That for him, he liked the nostalgia, of that truck. Like I said, it's the childhood. His dad had a few of those trucks. They had some Cadillacs.
Yeah.
So I think, Yezzi, obviously Squarebody Syndicate started up that clothing line that helped kind of enforce the name in people's minds. But the first, he had 3, Squarebody trucks that were all basically 100% factory.
Right.
And had just kind of maybe a little bit of a faded paint job on it, had all the trim. Some were stock height, some were a little bit lowered. Yeah. And then obviously things just evolve and you want to do more and keep, kind of customizing it. And, he'd pick up, things here and there, but, his SS1 truck, the blue and white one, was kind of, when that finally got, the full chassis, eye candy, full paint job on it, custom machined, billet steering wheel that made, mimicked the old style. Right. That kind of was one of those, of the generation of LaFonda and of the generation of these high-end C-10s being built. Right. And kind of what we were talking about, in the first episode of 6-figure Barrett-Jackson trucks. Yeah. If I'm correct, that was, I think he was one of the first to crack that 6-figure, got sold to Barrett-Jackson. I think it was like 125,000. Yeah. And that was like, oh, okay, all right, C-10s now are worth money. Yeah. Square bodies are worth money.
Well, also, too, I think why SS1 stuck out as much as it did is that he didn't do, it was more refinement than customization. Yeah. You brought up the custom billet steering wheel that looked like a factory steering wheel. He also did that with the air cleaner. I mean, it was a full billet air cleaner that looked like your sheet metal screw-on, air cleaner. Yeah.
And he also had that kind of the Dell LS3 wheels. Yeah. And even the wheels on that were, Dell designed those. They were 22s, but they were meant to look like the old custom sport wheels.
That's right. Yeah. 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 And that's why I think the right word for him is refinement. Dell, I'm going to say Dell, especially with the Action Line trucks, I think he was going after his individual look that he liked. Like, he had a shop truck in mind, and that was the design.
Well, and he did a couple square bodies as well, like Brownstone and stuff like that. But it was the very, similar kind of look to it. Yeah.
But I think with Yezzi, he looked at it as, okay, this is what I remember driving around as a kid. These are my good years that I'm driving around with my dad, having great memories. But what would that look like today? Yeah. And I think he just brought everything up to modernization, right? And, of course, he went on to, you can't not mention the Indy truck without, Square Body 1 was something that was completely done. And for him to come out with the Indy truck, great idea. Again, working on GM's kind of marketing machine that they work together with, different types of people to help promote their trucks. But, that was a GMC. I think the original one was a 75, and those were long beds. Yeah. And of course,
well, and he actually had an actual Indy truck, right? Square body, and was gonna do all that stuff to it. And I think he, got a good offer. Like, hey, well, might as well sell this, and then I'll just
make one.
Use that money to, do the kind of the, tribute edition, if you will. But that's the thing too. Like, you're talking about the refinement. Like, under the hood on that, it had a Magnuson Supercharger LS, but it had all the powder coating, and the paint was all meant to look like the 70s. And I think he even said he had a hot rod issue that had a engine on the cover. Yeah. And that was like the inspiration for under the hood on that.
I think also too, let's throw some credit towards Sam Castronova too, because I think he had the influence also on Joe to say, like, the gold valve covers to mimic an old Moroso valve cover. But Joe was like, well, I don't want to put Morosos on there. I'm gonna put Syndicate. So those two guys, they throw ideas out all the time, back and forth. And I think more or less it's Sam having this idea and Joe saying, okay, let's just do it. I mean, Joe's a construction guy, so he's used to building things. So to him, he's just like, well, what's it going to take to build it? So I think that those two guys really, again, I have to use the word refinement, because they took a diamond that needed to be dust off and cleaned up. And I think that's what we're seeing that still to this day. We're still seeing those cues from those guys that they did.
Well, and that's what a lot of the, C-10s and stuff I've seen is being kind of custom. I mean, yeah, you get some full-blown customs and stuff like that, but a lot of it is just modernizing and refining what was there.
Right.
Taking a lot of those, styling cues, but bringing them kind of, in a stylized way. I know we, got a lot of good publicity on the Squarebody side, when Gas Monkey did their Green Apple truck, and that's very similar kind of style. Obviously, okay, going to use full, suspension, Porter-built stuff on it. Keep it the two-tone, green and white, paint it all up, but do it all nice. And, and that was obviously at their kind of height of popularity on TV. And,
right.
It really kind of, they were doing hot rods and maybe some muscle cars and some rat rod stuff. Well, hey, now here's a Squarebody.
Yeah. And builds like that and TV shows like that, in my opinion, have really kind of legitimized this industry. Mm-hmm. Where, before, like, if you were building a truck, you were kind of an outcast. You were even either kind of weird or you didn't have enough money. And I think that these guys, especially through TV, you went to the masses and it became popular. Now people, they look for trucks. They're not just thinking that a truck's only a way to get a race car to a track. Well,
I remember us saying it and then people saying it back to us years later, not realizing, who had kind of said it. Like we were saying, the C-10 is the new Camaro.
It is.
Like you can do a lot of the same stuff that someone was doing to a 69, Chevy Camaro.
Right.
Turn it into a pro touring car, muscle car, and doing it on a C-10. And then all the companies started making the parts,
right,
for them. And that's the thing. I mean, the Squarebodies are kind of just the evolution of that. We started to see a little bit of performance stuff on there. I think still the 67 and 72, had the performance kind of locked in, if you're going for that. But, Buttercup.
Oh,
we're talking about Johnny G's.
Yeah. Beautiful
Squarebody,
truck.
Beautiful truck.
Right.
Coilover.
Yeah.
He wasn't back. Everyone else was bagging it on a Porter-built or a GSI or a chopping block or anything like that. And
that was LS powered as well.
Obviously LS swap,
Right.
And it had a set of Alden coilovers on it.
Now,
which was pretty unique for that kind of time period.
Exactly. And also too, I mean, let's bring up Johnny G. Johnny G spent some time with Dell, and I think some of that rubbed off on him, but I think Johnny was more of that performance guy. Mm-hmm. So when he built Buttercup, it wasn't kind of obviously his blue 72 was kind of also that somewhat performance looking thing.
Yeah.
But I think Buttercup was his first, I want to build the truck the way I want to build it. And I drove that truck. That truck does great donuts. I mean, when he was still in Southgate, he just said, let it eat. And sure enough, I mean, that thing was pretty easy to swing around and didn't take much to get it to spin. So, it was a very fun, and also just clean. Again, it goes back to that refinement thing. He took a factory color and made it cool, because tan's not a cool color.
One of the things was to have a matching truck or matching, truck and boat, behind it. I mean, obviously maybe paint them the same, kind of do that kind of stuff. And, I mean, I remember that growing up, that was kind of the cool thing to have.
You had to have your rig.
Yeah.
Right. Your hauler. Mm-hmm. That was the big thing. So, square bodies were really the first truck that you could order a crew cab, a dually, having a dual axle wheel that was factory, not a conversion, because there were some action lines that had dual wheel,
but they weren't axles from the dealership.
Was not from General Motors. That was a conversion truck done by an aftermarket company. Mm-hmm. Where now 73 comes out, and again, it goes back to the capacity wars. They need to have a 1-ton truck that can haul anything, and it needs 4 wheels in the back. So dualies became a big deal.
Yeah. And also that meant crew cab.
It did. Yeah.
So it wasn't like a Suburban, that was kind of the only thing you could have that had more than, a bench seat.
Right.
In it.
Right.
So yeah, you could go if you're going out to the lake or to the river or to a drag race or something like that.
Right.
You could have all your friends and your family.
Yeah.
Sitting in there.
Well, and believe me, I come from a boat background. I mean, I used to race boats. Obviously, grew up around the Colorado River, that kind of thing. And the 80s, you had to have a crew cab dually.
Mm-hmm.
That was just and if you didn't have 20 colors on it, you weren't that cool.
Yeah, well, it's boat graphics. They called it boat graphics.
Right, boat graphics, right,
Yeah.
And also, too, I mean, you look back at some of the other companies that came out of that, customizers, you have Pete Santini that, it was kind of on the heels of Carter Reed that was building all of these or painting all of these race car inspired paint jobs on these dualies to match their trailer or the car. Mm-hmm. But then, too, you had, Tim Sasamian, who started Trader's Truck Center, and he would outfit and fix up your square body, and obviously went into the 88 to 98 trucks. But that was the first place you could kind of drop something off and let somebody just, hey, I want it to look like this. And they would do it for you.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you were driving a boat for sure, you had a dually. And if you had one of those, it was lowered. It was graphics. The later 80s, you had like the sleeper cabs, you had the turbo wings, that kind of stuff. I mean, I know a lot of people would look at like Brett Oaks's truck right now as kind of the modern version of the 80s truck that was built. I'm talking a Rojo Grande. That truck screamed 80s, but had all modern powertrain in it. It was
well, that's what he was kind of
supercharged.
pulling back some of that old inspiration that he had back in the day.
Right.
So.
And it was funny being around that truck, just even recently being around that truck, the amount of people that walk up and say, yeah, I remember this, like that's etched in their brain. Mm-hmm. So obviously there was a big impact on that one. And to this day, there's still, a lot of people that are still fixing up old square body dualies. And that seems to be the dually that's, you put a Cummins, you put a Caterpillar, you put a...
True. Yeah, a lot of people are doing that.
They're not just leaving the stock big blocks, because most of those big blocks weren't really worth much. But, LS powered, Cummins powered, who knows?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, no, and then you're talking about, we're talking about like the kind of high-end builds, of especially like, Brad Oaks and stuff like that. But even more recently, at SEMA, we had, Brian Vowell's,
oh my God,
bankrupt, dually.
But Trey 5 and those guys,
Trey 5 built, eye candy, all that, and it had a Cummins in it, but it was the most probably beautiful Cummins you'll ever see, because no diesel Cummins guy is ever gonna, do all that plating and paint work and stuff, under the hood, and yeah, I mean that thing, especially I think with the square bodies, you see a lot of the factory trim kept on all of these.
Right.
Whereas you're refining it or you're refining everything else, but, especially if it's the early 70s one, you're seeing kind of all the trim, left on there. And one of the ones that stood out, 10 years ago, or more than 10 years ago, almost 12, 13, was like the Rayner Brothers.
Yeah, oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah. They had this, two-tone square body.
Right.
And it was an 80s one.
Well, that was an 85.
Yeah.
You're talking about the baby blue one. I was like, yes, this is what you're finally giving the 80s trucks their due, because the earlier 70s trucks with all the trim, they were popular because they were colorful, but the 80s came around, they, kind of got rid of using stainless trim on everything. Everything went to plastic, and it was very easy for GM too.
And the two-tone wasn't as big of a thing.
It wasn't in the 80s,
trucks,
right?
Yeah.
So what they would do is, they still would two-tone them, but they would use that tape to use instead of using a piece of trim, they would use like a piece of color tape.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, because obviously there's a clear end point and marking on the early 70s square bodies where you could, put the trim there, or at least wrap, your two-tone.
Yeah.
It kind of just dies off on the body line on the 80s one. So, okay. And I've seen some horrible two-toned ones of, not exactly going the right direction, or they just like, hey, let me end it into the grill. And then it's like, then you got a couple inches of just weird, paint marker there. But I know, and like, Brian Vestine, who worked at Status, now he's Vestine's Garage. He was doing a lot of the square body trucks, and he did, Mitch Henderson's, Sexual Chocolate C-10, and they were doing some patinaed square bodies even at Status. But he sells the tape, and first time I saw one that was two-toned, that he did of an 80s one, he did it exactly right.
Right.
Where it wasn't awkward, it looked natural, and that's the same thing that the Rayner brothers did, where it had the perfect kind of two-tone line for the 80s style truck.
Yeah, yeah. It's fun when you see a truck like that changes the game. And even too, going back to the Rayner brothers truck, there was nothing too special, but at the time it was just the right color combination, the right execution. Obviously those guys build very nice vehicles, so everything was top notch. That's kind of hard to sit there and say like, oh, this one's not as cool as the last one, but it just, the timing of that truck really just kind of made like the light go on, and I think that's what those trucks allow you to do. They're more versatile than the other ones because, again, they have an early version, they have a later version.
True.
Which one are you the front?
Yeah, obviously we talked about grill changes on the earlier ones, but they weren't as drastic and dramatic as the Squarebody trucks. And then obviously we touched on all the dualies and the different kind of spans, but it's also kind of maybe even leading into the future where we're talking about the Blazers and the K5s. We didn't touch on those.
Right.
The same body style, same parts you can put on them, but they kind of have their own style and their own kind of fans.
Well, with that too, there's a few nicknames that the Squarebodies also come up with. Like, obviously a dually is referred to as a Cowboy's Cadillac, and a Suburban is obviously a Mormon station wagon.
Never heard those, but I might have to use those.
But that's the other nice thing is that they always have a purpose for everybody. Blazers, most of the time you had a 4-wheel drive.
Yeah, well, that's what most of them were, all 4-wheel drive.
But it made sense though. Wheelbase was perfect. Track width was perfect. Yeah. They're a great off-road. Removable top. I mean, how much fun can you have in a Blazer? That's like, they're awesome. Suburban too. You got a big family or you got a lot of people? You need Suburban. Yeah. Right? Still can tow whatever you want.
Yeah. Still can put a thing of sheet metal in the back, or
totally.
Plywood in the back.
Totally. Yeah. And then, your crew cab dualies. Yeah. Work truck. Work truck or a hauler. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, if you're towing a trailer or towing a boat, you want a dually.
The other one, river limo.
River limo, nice.
Well, great.
So, that's the thing. It's, C10s in general, whether it's a square body, whether it's the, early 60s, you're now seeing $500,000 builds. Even we saw that with a square body recently where, you had 3D printed door, panels, you had custom dashes, you had insane amount of work and just beautiful trucks. And it's kind of basically now like the trucks have cemented themselves as part of the overall automotive scene. It's kind of like, usually there's always been like the trucks or but it's been like maybe the off-road, the lifted guys or the stuff like that, whereas now it's you can't, if you say a 32 Ford, you say a 55 Chevy, you say a 69 Camaro, you say a C10.
Exactly.
It's they're all at the same level.
Right.
And but one thing that I do think is really cool is one that's worth $300,000 is going to get probably the same amount of attention as one that is just a preserved factory one.
Yes.
But you might not get that with a 32 Ford. You want the Roadster, you want the full hot rod. With a truck, it still has that really cool, styling to it.
I think you're right. You're bringing up like last SEMA show. We saw some amazing square bodies.
Yeah.
You brought up 3D printing. I think now the sky's the limit, especially with the square bodies because they are very versatile. It seems like more people, and again too, the square body interiors weren't really all the greatest in the world, especially from the 80s. Finding a preserved one that doesn't have broken door panels, and that's a lot kind of ridiculous.
The 80s, the plastic,
right,
very brittle.
But I think with what we have to offer now in today's technology, where if you can dream it, they can build it. Honestly, I think that these trucks have a lot more legs than some of the other trucks. And the other thing too is just because some of the other trucks, we're also looking at vehicles that are over 50 years old now.
Yeah, right. We know there's a longer year span on the square bodies, so there's going to be more opportunities to build these, and they're going to be in a little bit better condition than some of the older ones.
Yeah.
So that wraps up the C10s. Obviously, you start getting into 88, that's the CK line, NBS. So we're going to be exploring, more of these models, the history of them, but not just from the factory, but from the aftermarket's perspective, the customizers, the builders, and the influencers. So stay tuned, and we'll see what we cover next.